Leadership is such a massive topic that is spoken about a lot in business, none more so than in the health and medical industry. There's some huge parallels in between how the Australian military work. And today I'm going to talk in our podcast with Mick Donaldson, who's an SAS veteran of Australian military for more than 15 years in the SAS alone, and how we can learn more about like the leadership profiles and the way in which leadership and the core values surrounding that for the Australian military can obviously ultimately affect us and help us in building our own health and medical businesses. So let's go and get stuck in right now. G'day everyone, welcome to another podcast. Special guest with me today on my left or my right, depending on which way it appears on the screen, Mick Donaldson. I'll do a quick little intro for you, Mick. 15 plus years in the Australian SAS, still a reservist with the Special Forces, a really illustrious career in the Australian military, multiple overseas trips. Name a country and you've been there, and there's probably a lot that you can't actually talk about anyway. Mate, you've been a credit to the country and what we've been able to achieve military-wise, and now you run a fantastic business in regards to TAG International Adventure Group out of Southeast Queensland. Mate, thank you very much for jumping onto our podcast today.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So this specific podcast, we're going to talk to you about a couple of different things, but I really wanted to tap into your sort of definition of leadership, and we want to talk all about leadership in this podcast. What makes a good leader, what you've seen, what you feel hasn't been. Obviously leadership in a military sense is critically important, and literally I'm not lying when I say it's a life and death situation, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'd love to start off by saying, like, how do you feel about leadership? What do you sort of see as good leadership? And let's take it from there.
So I have a thing called the culture of success, and there's three key components to that, and that's team, trust, and leadership. And leadership to me underpins everything. If you've got good leadership, and good leadership is really hard to do consistently, if you've got good leadership, a lot of that other stuff doesn't fall into place, but it's an enabler. And I'm a big believer in that anyone can be a leader. Leadership exists at all levels. It's not just generals or heads of state or CEOs or anything like that. I've seen instances where in an emergency evacuation where the janitor has stepped up into a leadership role and exceeded those that should have been leading because he kept a cool head, knew what to do, right person for the right time, and then went back into the shadows when it was over. So And people get a bit confused, I think, sometimes about, if you've got manager in your title, that means you're a leader. It doesn't mean you're a manager. If you've got CEO, if your title starts with a C, doesn't necessarily mean you're a good leader.
There could be other connotations of word C's there too.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, exactly. We won't go down that.
No, better not.
Road. But, I think management is a subset of leadership, or it sits sort of, if you're looking at a Venn diagram, there's an intersection there. It doesn't necessarily mean just because you're a manager that you're a good leader. As I said, good leadership is really, really hard to do.
And it's really interesting you say that, because I've been really, I think I polarized a lot of people in the last probably 6 to 12 months in regards to exactly this, because I feel that a lot of people fall into the trap of management and leadership. In many respects, they feel are the same thing, or if they've got enough nous to say they're different, they still can't accurately disseminate the difference. And so they find themselves always talking about being a better leader. You got to lead your team, lead the business, lead. But a lot of the time they're actually fumbling around a management principle. Yeah. So it's really interesting that you led straight out with that, actually. And we haven't spoken about this before. I literally said, we're going to talk about leadership, and you went, okay. So there was no prep. But
strong believer in that. You manage assets, you lead people.
Yeah, I love it. Say it again, just so everyone gets it again.
So manage assets, but you lead people.
Yeah, absolutely. And so talk to me about, like, obviously the SAS and things like that. Well, there's obviously some clear definitive differences between the management side and the leadership side in an SAS role. How do you really identify a good manager from a good leader?
Well, in the world I existed in, it was about leadership. You had to manage time and resources and things like that. But if you didn't get the leadership part right, people died. Worst case, or you didn't achieve the mission. And typically, we conduct the jobs that others can't or won't do. They always have, whilst they're tactical in nature, they usually have a geopolitical and strategic consequence. So you're always thinking at least 2 or 3 levels up. Every decision I made, I'd have to, or I stopped and thought about how this would reflect on Australia's reputation. Sort of pictured the Prime Minister trying to explain why Mick did this. And a lot of times we were operating in a coalition environment, so also had to think about
other countries, other forces.
Those other countries, the Western world, that sort of thing. So, it's a pretty heavy burden to bear. But, we're very much hands-on. Big believer in lead from the front, lead by example. You set the standard. You never ask anyone to do anything that you wouldn't do yourself, or more typically, you haven't done yourself.
Yeah, I like that.
Hypocrisy is, we're all human. It happens, but you need to minimize that, those do as I say, not as I do moments.
Yeah, absolutely. And we see that a lot in business, let's be honest. It's kind of ironic. I sort of talk about the cleaning of the toilet as a good example. Like a good leader in a health clinic or a medical clinic is the person that's more than happy to
get in and
go in and go to the bathroom and say, hey, you know what? It's not just about pick up a bit of the tissue paper on the floor, but you know what? It actually needs to be clean. I'm going to go and get the spray and wipe. I'm going to get the toilet duck, and I'm going to get the plunger or whatever. I'm going to spend the 5 minutes cleaning this because it needs to be done.
That's right.
And not sing it from the rooftops to talk yourself up, but just actually go, like people like us do things like this.
That's right. No, and that's about humility as opposed to hubris. They both start with H, both have a U in them, and I think some people need to learn the difference between the two.
Yeah, absolutely. And that phrase I just said before as well, Seth Godin actually taught me that, was people like us do things like this. And I think it's a really good avenue to be able to utilize that in regards to leadership and how we can actually lead from the front, so the saying goes.
Yes.
So it's a really interesting one. So if you've got someone that is wanting to improve their leadership, or they're wanting to make sure that they are leading, etc., better than what they are now, what's something that or a couple of tips or tactics and that you think is something to really aim for or strive to do?
Well, I've already touched on them. I mean, if you lead from the front, and it's not just about being at the front, but it's setting that standard, setting the example, maintaining those standards, being there at when the times are tough or when the jobs are shitty, with your team, then you're going to build you're going to build that team, you're going to strengthen that team, and you're going to build that trust. Trust is not something that's given cheaply. It takes a lot to earn that and build that trust, and it takes 5 seconds to lose. So there, by displaying good leadership, you've actually produced the 2 other core components of that culture of success. And be, humble. It's not a weakness. It's actually a strength. Show compassion. Be competent at what your job is. And if that's just leadership, then be a good leader. No one expects in an organization of any type that the person in charge is going to be an expert of every single job that organization has. You probably need to have an awareness of how that works and how it fits into the business model. But be competent at what your role is. And as I said, if that's leadership, then be a good leader. Integrity, you got to have integrity, because if you don't, then you lose that trust, all those other things. You need to be resilient and determined. Leadership is not a popularity contest.
Absolutely.
I think some of our political leaders at the moment could take some points there.
Absolutely. There's a few state premiers that you could drop some details in, which we won't. We won't go there.
No. Let's not. I probably shouldn't have said that. But you've also got to display courage, and by that I'm not talking about storming a Taliban machine gun post. That's bravery. That's fleeting. That's exercise at the moment. The courage is much. I believe courage is much longer lasting. It's something that comes from within, and courage in a business sense, or a leadership sense in totality. I'm talking about moral and ethical courage to see something through, courage to do the right thing, courage to admit that you're wrong, all those things.
Yeah.
Another big thing is equanimity. Now, if you're wondering what that word is, I didn't come up with that. My partner in life and business did, and she's got the brain.
She's got
yeah. So what that means is calmness under pressure. So it's basically don't lose your head, because fear and panic is infectious. And if you're humans will do great things, suffer great hardships, and put themselves in mortal danger. I've seen it. If they believe in the cause and they're well led, if they believe that this is the right thing to do, that you've got a good plan and you're going to execute it well, they'll storm the gates of hell. So that's sort of my top five. Well, top five there.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Yeah. And it's so pertinent. And that's part of the reason why I wanted to chat to you about this, because it's something that literally is on many occasions, no doubt, has been a life and death situation with you guys in that situation. So Mick, that was fantastic. One thing I really picked up on there was you mentioned about people being humble, and you mentioned about, good leaders are able to maybe admit when they're wrong, or that something hasn't gone right. And that's something I think is a really integral part of leadership. And I think it's something that's not seen or valued near as much. I'd love you to just maybe talk on that for a minute about the power of being able to show strength in leadership by maybe admitting that they were wrong or something didn't quite go right, etc. Just talk to me about that if you could.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, we're all human. We all make mistakes. So to think that as a leader you're not going to make a wrong call at some stage is unrealistic.
It's a bit ignorant too, I guess, in many respects.
Yeah, ignorant, arrogant, a whole heap of the way we get around that is that right at that problem analysis planning stage. So we bring the collective in, because 6 heads are better than one. So from the get-go, you've got everyone involved in that whole process, that decision-making process. At the end of the day, the leader owns it and is responsible and accountable for it. But if you've got buy-in, then one, you're more likely to get it right. And two, if it does go wrong, everyone had a say. So that softens the blow. But back to your main point, it's not a sign of weakness to admit you're wrong. It's how you admit you're wrong, I guess. And it's what you do with that. It's also about when your team gets it wrong, if how you manage that. Everyone makes mistakes, and you can't grow and you can't get maximum efficiency if you're punishing people with punitive measures for making mistakes, because then they won't take risks, and without risk there is no reward. So it's managing that whole process. But never be afraid to admit that you're wrong, and it's not just I was wrong, let's crack on. It's got that wrong, and we have a debrief process where you analyze. You always ask yourself, if I had to do that again, what could I do better? And the other thing is, when anything goes wrong, whether it's mine or anyone else's, the first question I ask is, did I do everything possible or everything that was appropriate to set the conditions for success? What didn't I do to make this succeed, or to avoid that mistake? And that should always be the first point of reflection. Absolutely.
And I think it's a really, really powerful question to ask. And it's probably one that I feel that we don't see enough with leadership. The self-analysis as a very first step of how we could actually have been better, do better, what could have changed, how could we have influenced things. And I think the power of that direct, sort of almost immediate feedback and analysis is crucial to be able to make better decisions and improve for next time.
Absolutely. I mean, we live in a culture of blame. We're all trying to witch hunt, and occupational health and safety has a part in that. The way we've developed that culture, it's always important to keep your people safe. Absolutely. We do it through camaraderie and mateship, and believing in that cause. That's how we primarily manage risk. Some pretty ridiculous risks, really. But
absolutely,
it's getting beyond that, so that people will tell the truth. People will put their hand up and own those mistakes, so that they don't think they're going to be sacked. They don't think they're going to be put in jail or whatever. I mean, if they've done something really wrong and they did it deliberately,
heinous,
that's right. Then there are consequences to life, both good and bad. But if it was an honest mistake, then
And I think
learn
that
from it and
comes
move on.
down to culture. Let's be completely honest. It's a
That's
lot
right.
of a cultural understanding of, and that circle of safety. I always find that leaders need to create that circle of safety. And, like Simon Sinek's done some great work with the American military in and around that circle of safety, and how, like he's got a great book, that Leaders Eat Last, and the fact that the general's the last one in a mess hall to actually eat and things like that. And
that's exactly what we do.
Yeah.
Yep.
No, it's fantastic. Mick, I really value your time. I know that we're going to be doing some other podcasts, and we're going to go into values and beliefs and all sorts of fantastic accountability, etc. But for the leadership side of things, mate, I really appreciate it. I'm obviously grateful for everything you've done for all of us in the country over the years. Appreciate your time and look forward to chatting with you again very soon.
No worries. Pleasure.
Cheers.